because From just ended. I've started rewatching the show with all the new information we got. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you all the clues that I found during the first episode. The reason why I'm only focusing on the pilot is because the show's producers told us that this episode holds a lot of secrets, so I tried to see if I could uncover some of them. The first thing that I noticed is the jukebox starting to play after Sarah touched the talisman. In the last season, we saw that there is actually a reason behind this when Sophia turned it on to attract the monsters to the diner, drawing their attention away from her so she could cut the ladder. What I found pretty interesting is the song they chose and its lyrics. This isn't much of a clue, it's more of an Easter egg, but it was a nice one to spot. The song is "We Gotta Get Out of This Place" by the Animals. I think we can all agree that the title matches their situation perfectly. The first lyrics are, "In this dirty old part of the city where the sun refused to shine, people tell me there ain't no use in trying." Again, this line describes exactly what we saw in the show. Where the sun refused to shine could refer to the monsters and how they couldn't walk in the daylight. People tell me there ain't no use in trying could refer to how people tried to get out of town but always ended up in the same place over and over again until they eventually convinced themselves there was no point in trying to escape anymore. "You'll be dead before your time is due" plays as the camera focuses on Megan. Again, this was a subtle hint about how she was going to die, as well as the fate of all the minnows trapped in a shark's net. Moving forward, after Boyd finishes his iconic walk through town ringing the bell, the camera focuses on the missing motel sign. Normally, I wouldn't even bat an eye at this, but during the Q&A, the writers said that it would become relevant in season 5, so I can't wait to see what the connection is. While I was rewatching this episode, I forgot how cute the flirting between Christy and Kenny was. I always hoped they would end up together. One particular element this episode focuses on is the talismans. We are shown 4 different instances of people directly touching them, and we also see Boyd picking one up from the floor. I also talked about this next point in one of my previous videos, so I'm just going to summarize it here. I'm referring to the story Julie tells Ethan. I think this is actually a reference to what's going to happen later in the series. I think Norman is represented by the children. "The secret fairies are on their way back from the Lake of Tears. They're gonna fix you," Ethan cried after Norman died and told Julie, "The fairies are coming from the Lake of Tears. They're gonna make him better." Julie ultimately told him, "Norman is dead, and when you're dead, you're gone." After that, Tabitha came and made everything better by telling Ethan, "There are no such things as monsters, and if there are no such things as monsters, then that means Norman's still alive, doesn't it?" Now that we know the Lake of Tears is real and can actually be found, I think this scene translates to the following. The children are Norman, and they need to take the bones to the Lake of Tears so they can be brought back to life and end the curse. The monster's claws went too deep could literally refer to the way the monsters kill their victims. We always see them killing people in that exact way. Once they bring the bones to the Lake of Tears and the children are revived, the original bargain would be broken, and the creatures would no longer be monsters. This ties directly into Tabitha's line, because there are no such things as monsters, and if there are no such things as monsters, then Norman is still alive. Lastly, we hear Julie say, "Sorry buddy, Norman's dead, and when you're dead, you're gone." But that doesn't apply to Fromville. Marielle said that when people die, their souls remain trapped there as well, so the children's souls are still tied to that place. This is why they kept reappearing to Tabitha, because their souls are still there. I think they are the secret fairies who are going to make everything better. Next up, we have another iconic scene, the one where Boyd tells Frank, "A man protects his family." After everything we've seen so far in this series, especially after learning that the children were sacrificed by their own parents, which is the reason all of this is happening, I think this line from Boyd becomes a reference to the entire show. In this episode, we have another man who couldn't protect his family because of his condition. I'm talking about Liu, Kenny's father. Later in the series, we see that Tian Chen is also killed. Hopefully, nothing bad happens to Kenny, because he's my favorite character. The last father-son dynamic we see in this episode is between Boyd and Ellis. Their relationship is clearly strained, with Ellis not even wanting to see his father. We later learn why. Ellis begged Boyd to stay because Abby wasn't feeling well, but in the end, Boyd was the one who had to kill her. Maybe the anger and frustration in Boyd's voice when he says, "A man protects his family," actually comes from the guilt of not being able to protect Abby. Another Easter egg, although I can't really call it foreshadowing, is when Boyd tells Ellis about Fatima. She doesn't change. I have some news for you. Fatima changed more than anyone else, and it definitely wasn't for the better. I've always believed that funerals are a very important ritual in this place, which is why I think the writers included this funeral scene in the very first episode. The boy in white told Victor that if he couldn't bury all the bodies, he should at least collect one personal item from each person and bury that instead. Donna asked Boyd multiple times if he had buried Roger, but Boyd had other things to deal with and forgot. Because of that, Sophia was able to resurrect Roger and use him to spread panic throughout Colony House. I believe that if things are buried properly, then the man in yellow can't use those bodies. What do you think? I also think that the dialogue between Julie and Ethan after they see the tree is much more revealing than it first appears. Julie tells Ethan, "It's called a murder of crows, because when they gather like that, and if you see them doing it, then you're the one they murder. Once they see you, they won't stop hunting you." I don't know about you, but to me, this feels like foreshadowing. No matter how hard you try, once you've been chosen, you'll always end up in that place. For the first time after all my rewatches of this show, I realized something in this episode that I believe is a huge clue. It might even support one of the oldest theories, that Julie was the one who placed the talisman on the floor in Megan's house during one of her story walks. It always felt strange that the talisman was simply lying on the ground. Even Boyd seemed surprised and picked it up. Now think about it. Everything that happened later in the series was only possible because Boyd picked up that talisman. Just stay with me here, because the implications are insane. The Matthews family arrives in town, and after driving through the loop twice, they almost crash into Jade's car. At that moment, Kenny and Boyd are preparing the road spikes, but after Toby arrives injured and tells them about the crash, Boyd rushes to the scene. Fast forward a bit. Ethan is badly injured, and they have no choice but to spend the night inside the RV. Because Boyd had found the talisman on the ground earlier and picked it up, they already had one with them to protect the RV. If Boyd hadn't had that talisman, they wouldn't have had enough time to drive back to town, grab one, and return to the crash site before nightfall. The only reason they survived that night was because Boyd had that fallen talisman. But the implications go even further. Because of that event, Fatima was later able to save herself and Ellis during the Colony House massacre by using the exact same method. Since Boyd knew that a talisman worked inside an enclosed space, he and Sarah later ventured into the woods. Boyd ended up inside the well, where he met Martin and eventually killed Smiley. That ultimately led to Fatima giving birth to Smiley, and I believe that's the reason she eventually became a monster. Because they also knew the talismans could work this way, Jade and Tabitha were later able to dig up the bones safely. As you can see, the simple fact that Boyd had that talisman in his pocket created a domino effect that pushed the story further than any previous cycle we've seen. That's why there's a popular theory that Julie was actually the one who placed that talisman there, to make sure Boyd picked it up. The last thing that caught my attention in this first episode is Ethan's seizure at the very end. This scene felt very similar to what Julie experiences while story walking, so could Ethan have story walked here as well? The episode ends there, but in the next episode, when Ethan wakes up, he says, "I saw the Lake of Tears. It was a drawing on the wall, and we were all there in the drawings, but somebody screamed because the spider came down from the ceiling." After everything we've seen across all 4 seasons, I think Ethan may have story walked here as well. So, what do you think? Do you plan on rewatching the first episode? And if you do you think you'll spot any hidden secrets that the creators planted for us? Let me know in the comments.